Hello, Positive Filter listeners. It's Philip Wilkerson, back with another episode of Positive Filter. So on October 15th, the brothers of Iota Alpha and the brothers of Theta Rho Lambda hosted a voter webinar. During this webinar, the panelists shared why it's important to get engaged and why it's important to vote. We experienced some technical difficulties during this episode, but all in all, the conversation was very fruitful and insightful. Hopefully, you gained some insights on why voting in this upcoming election is very important. Enjoy. Welcome to Positive Filter with your host, Philip Wilkerson, a podcast that focuses on friends, family, health, and career, with a little self-help along the way. Please join me in this journey for self-improvement, and I hope what I have to share will make you a better person, thus making the world a better place. I hope you enjoy the show. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Positive Filter / Theta Rho Lambda / Iota Alpha webinar on everyone has a voice, everyone has a vote. So this webinar tonight is about voter engagement and voter participation. I'm joined by multiple people throughout the Fairfax County area in different sectors, Mason, Fairfax County government, to share their experiences about voting themselves and also ways that you can get engaged. But before we get started, I'd like to have some welcoming words from the president of Theta Rho Lambda, Brother Keith Lang, who will share why we're doing this tonight and why we're hosting this webinar. So Keith, take it away.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you to Brother Wilkerson, who's the fall 2017 initiator of our chapter, and we're very proud of the work he's doing. We're here tonight because Voteless People is a Hopeless People is one of our national programs. It's one of our most important programs. It's a program we hold near and dear to our heart, and it's about registering voters, engaging voters, informing voters, and that is especially important in this year's election, obviously. So the Theta Rho Lambda chapter is proud to partner with the Positive Filter podcast and the Iota Alpha chapter at George Mason University on this event, and we look forward to a great discussion.
So, unfortunately, the brothers of Iota Alpha could not be here tonight because of prior engagement with school and work. Scholarship is first. So I put in there in the banner, if you take a look, if you're interested in learning more about Iota Alpha at George Mason and the work they're doing, just please follow them on Instagram, connect, and really help elevate their presence at George Mason University. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our various panelists here tonight, and I'm just going to bring them on screen for this show. So first up, I want to bring up my old man, my dad. So retired Colonel Philip Wilkerson Jr. My dad is a great man. Unfortunately, we pick different paths. He's a member of Omega Psi Phi, but hey, we all pick different paths in life. But my dad has been instrumental in really advocating about why voting is important. Additionally, just showing me through his actual lived example why getting involved is important. So please welcome to the stage retired Colonel Philip Linwood Wilkerson Jr.
Thank you, son. It's an honor to be here, everyone, and I'm looking forward to a very positive discussion.
I love how you say that, positive. All right, great. Next we got up is one of my co-workers from George Mason, Demarcus Merritt. Now, Demarcus is the Assistant Director of Belonging and Engagement here. He's a new colleague of mine, but he's also, I've seen the incredible work that he's done throughout his career, and I just want to welcome him to the stage tonight.
Yes, thank you, Philip. Thank you to everyone who is involved in putting this platform together. So I also am glad to be here and looking forward to a fruitful conversation.
Next up is a fellow Duke dog of mine, and I guess now a current Mason student, my friend Paul Davis. We were connected at JMU, go Dukes. But now Paul is getting his master's, I believe, in public administration or public policy. He also works through Fairfax County government, so he knows the ins and outs of the system. It's really helped me learn a lot more. If you're a listener of Positive Filter, you know he's a returning guest, multiple guests. He's like kind of like my political correspondent. Welcome to the stage, Paul Davis.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh,
really
man.
excited.
You coming in hot. I love it. I love it. And last but not least, this is a young man. He's doing great things. I think a recent graduate of University of Virginia, but currently doing a lot of great work with the NAACP, particularly the statewide component of the NAACP, and that's how we got connected. Welcome to the stage, brother Tyreek Chambers.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank y'all so much for having me.
Excellent. So let's welcome everybody back to the stage. We're going to have a great discussion. For those that are listening right now, please feel free to throw in your comments, your questions, your concerns, all those things. My producer is going to bring them all on stage right now at the bottom. So bring everyone on stage, and we're going to have a great discussion. There you go. So the first question, I kind of want to have an icebreaker for everybody. So taking yourself back, what was the first general national election that you participated in, and how did you go about it? I'll share first. So my first major election was 2004, Kerry Bush, and you don't have to share who you voted for. Obviously we are a nonpartisan webinar, but I remember this was in 2024. I was a student at Bowie State, but I did not remember to change my registration. So I drove home from Bowie to my home in Alexandria and voted at the local high school. But it was really an honor. I felt so great doing that first election. And so I want to just go around. This is kind of the icebreaker to get us started for the conversation. Do you remember your first national election, and how did you go about it? I'm going to start with Demarcus.
Wow. Definitely had to think back for a second. I would think mine is probably entering maybe 2000, going into starting my collegiate career at Virginia State University. Honestly, I was looking forward more to vote than I was to get my driver's license, because it was that important to me. And so same thing, but I was in Petersburg, Virginia, and then I ended up having to come back to Richmond in order to vote. But I definitely remember that feeling of feeling like I was a part of something bigger than myself, and something I have been waiting for a long time.
Going up to my dad. Dad, when was the first time you voted in a national election? Do you remember who it was, and how did you go about it?
I do remember it was 1976, and I had to do it absentee. I was actually in the military at that time, in the Army, and I was stationed in Korea. I was a Virginia resident, and I have stories, so I'm not going to digress, but Virginia is very good with keeping up with their military or their absentee folks. So I got notified. I got all the paperwork I needed, filled it out, and sent it back. Now, I was just thinking, 76, golly, my memory is going me on that one. It must have been, who's a history major here? I was going to say.
I don't know. Let's just assume it was Jimmy Carter or something. I don't know. If you're listening, throw that in the chat. 1976. Figure out, throw us some history. But Dad, that's great. And I want to do one follow-up question before I go to our next person. How did you know about the process of absentee ballot and all that? Because, obviously that's a lot of work. And, I had you at home to know, hey, Dad, I got to go to this Stratford Landing. So I had you at home. Who guided you on that, your first election?
Well, interestingly enough, there's a couple of ways to answer that. Partly in high school, political science was actually a course that was taught to all high school seniors in Virginia during that time. I mean, you had to select it, obviously. I mean, but it was available. I was a BA history major, so I even got even more exposure to the political process because I chose different governmental courses during my college career. So when I entered the military, I mean, I was pretty much from the history standpoint, I was pretty much up on. I knew that was one of the responsibility of citizenship is to vote. So I kind of kept that up myself. Now I may be a little naive or different, but I actually did some investigation and made sure that I was registered and that I could vote. I don't know. Does that answer the question?
Excellent, Dad, and thank you. Obviously, I think that shows a lot of agency and a lot of thought on your own to do that research. So, Paul, what was your first major election? How'd you go about it?
Honestly, I can't remember the first one. I always remember me volunteering first, and just the election day process happening and being engaged and helping other people vote, but making sure that I went out and voted. But mostly from a volunteer standpoint, I think it was that Kerry election. I think it was before Obama. But that was kind of where I was volunteering. But that's my first one.
And that was the one I was talking about. I think it was Kerry Bush, 2004. So shout out. And I know your age. We're the same age. So yeah, I'm assuming that's the same one. Now we're gonna have the young boy over here, the young boy, Tyleek. I think you probably voted yesterday. Would you just turn 18? I don't know. But Tyleek, when was the first election that you participated in?
So the first election that I remember voting in was actually 2018. So it was literally, I think, like 4 or 6 months after my 18th birthday. And I remember because that was the Senate race in Virginia where Tim Kaine had won against Corey Stewart, if I remember correctly. And again, kind of before then, being a part of the NAACP, this was just kind of the expectation that was set, right? Like, turn 18, you exercise your liberties, your right to vote. So I think that was my first time ever voting period. And I would say the 2020 presidential election is kind of that kind of next, I guess, milestone for me when it comes to voting. But as soon as I turned 18, I was voting.
You spoke to it, and we're going to totally into it. So how did you navigate your first national election during COVID, right? Like that was November of COVID. Can you speak to your experience? And maybe at that point, I'm assuming you were in college. So how did you navigate that as a college student? Because this is part of this is educating for Mason votes as students and stuff. So maybe 2 points. How was that navigating there during COVID? And how did you get excited as a college student?
Yeah, I mean, navigating it in general, right? Our election process, though it is a engaging process, and I find a lot of pride in exercising the right to vote. It can be tedious, right? And then COVID adds a whole other layer on top of it. Thankfully, at the time, the University of Virginia was very adamant when it came to our COVID regulations, and everybody's getting tested every other day. So, the COVID aspect was a little minor, right? But when it comes to being informed as to my polling stations, where I needed to vote, right? Registration, deadlines, absentee ballots, all of that information, thankfully, being a part of my NAACP chapter at the University of Virginia at the time, we received a lot of that kind of guidance and resources from our national office. So, I, via proxy of being a part of the NAACP, I had a wealth of knowledge and felt really, really comfortable and really prepared when it came to, that November 2020 voting. And I think one of the things that we really tried to push on the grounds of the University of Virginia, right, was that additional information because, polling places people don't know. Sometimes it's on grounds, sometimes it's off of grounds. And grounds is the campus for those who are not UVA, Wahoo alumni. So yeah, I think, I had the privilege of being connected to the NAACP as an organization that prides itself in civic engagement and making sure that young voters especially have the necessary information to, know what they're doing, feel comfortable and confident about exercising their right to vote, and all they really need to focus on is going and exercising their constitutional rights. So hope that answered the question.
That is excellent. It did answer my question. And one of my follow-up questions before I ask another question was, as you were mobilizing on the grounds of the yard, or whatever you call UVA, the University of Virginia, did you get any kickback? Did you notice your peers were engaged? Were you caught off guard? He was like, yo, I'm gung-ho about voting, but the people in my classes are not. Talk about that experience as a student trying to mobilize voters in college.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of twofold, right? So I think you have the pool of students or my peers, right, who knew about voting, but like was kind of like, everything's rigged. We kind of call them kind of the conspiracy theorists, right? Like everything's rigged. It's not going to matter anyway, right? And as a native Virginianer myself, right, like I have the privilege of kind of having a wealth of knowledge about the history of Virginianers and just African Americans specifically, right, fighting for the civil liberties for us to exercise our right to vote, right. So I think one of our approaches was first from a point of education, right. So educating our peers about the history of voting in Virginia, right, and how 60, 65, 70 years ago, right, voting as a young Black person, right, looks completely different than it can and it does do now, right? So, I think that was the first part. And when it comes to pushback, we really didn't receive a lot of pushback because one of the things with the NAACP, right, we're nonpartisan, right? So we're not going out there and telling folks, hey, you need to register to vote and also vote for so-and-so. It's, hey, we just want to make sure you're registered to vote. Here are the platforms of all of the candidates that are going to be on the ballot. Here's what they stand for. Here's what, they are in favor of, what they're not in favor of, and we leave you all to make your educated guess as to who you want to vote for. But the important thing is that we got you registered to vote. We gave you the information as to where your polling location is, and that we have energized you and informed you, right, of, all the necessary tools for you to make an executive decision as to who has earned your vote, right? So I mean, I think looking back at my time at UVA, it was more like having to kind of, and I know we're going to get into this a little later, but kind of breaking down a lot of that misinformation or disinformation that exists, whether it's candidate oriented disinformation or misinformation, or just misinformation about our election process in general, and kind of breaking down people's fatigue and distrust of our election system, and really trying to get folks kind of on board when it comes to why exercising our right to vote is so vitally important for our democracy.
See, I knew why I got this young man on here, man. He's speaking gems, man. I feel like he's an old soul in a young body. So, Dad, I want to bring you back, because, I know your story. You are a first-generation college student. I don't think we ever talked about this before, but, did your father vote? Did your mom vote? And what was the experience growing up? Did you, did they stress to you about the importance of voting as a child growing up?
And I appreciate you addressing that, because that's been heavy on my mind. The answer is no. My exposure to voting was historical. For whatever reason, I always enjoyed the history that's growing up. And like I said, I graduated high school in the 60s, and just so happened political science, government courses were actually offered in high school. I don't know if they are now. Mr. Chambers brought up an excellent point. The earlier you start the exposure. So just like, and you didn't mention this, but I'll mention because I'm very proud of it. You and I went to vote together. And just like your sister and I, the first time she voted, we went to vote together. Young people need to see examples of the process, and we have them there. The exposure, the ones that come to the mind are the NAACP, our local churches, our local sororities and fraternities. There are channels where young people get the exposure about voting itself. So I guess the gem I would like for everyone to take from that: the younger you expose, the younger they start. That's how you get the generations to get involved.
I mean, that's excellent. I think my kids have been to all the voting except for this one. I did this by myself because I wanted to get out the way. But they've come to everyone. They get the little sticker, and it's a future voter and all that stuff, and exposure, and they get the bake sale outside, so they see the process. And I think that's a great point. It's without being said, if those are listening right now, it's all Black men. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're all Black men on this panel, and we're showing. I think that for me, I wanted to use this as a channel to show that representation of Black men vote. So Demarcus, my next question is for you. As a Black man, and I'm pretty sure you're well-educated Black man, why do you vote? That's gonna be the thing. Why? What is the point? Why should, I want you to dial in, why should everyone vote, but particularly why you as a Black man feel it's important to vote?
Yeah, much to what your father and Tyleek and others have shared. Like, I grew up seeing the demonstration. I wasn't exactly in the poll with my mom. I'm a single mother household, but she always talked to me. My mom didn't take off work a lot of times, but when she did take off, it was either something dealing with the church or she was going to vote. And I knew that was time she was going to, I sit and wait in the car. We didn't talk a lot about like who she voted for and that kind of things, but she was very diligent, as well as some other family members telling me, just make an informed decision. And so, things that you do as a parent, they really do matter. So I remember we didn't talk a lot as far as until I got older in high school and into my college years about the importance of voting. And then really my history teacher in high school and starting on with them as well, they really stressed the importance of voting and how much of a privilege and responsibility it is, because of how much of a fight that it took to get us to a point through voter suffrage and those kind of things, and continued things that we have to continue to battle in order to have that right restored to us and being able to access that. So, and they really painted a big picture, because I used to think that, voting is just this one day, but they really shaped me, especially as I got deeper into my college career, paying attention to your local election, paying attention to how decisions are being made, understand how Congress works, understand how the Senate works, understanding when people put out their agenda, what are they actually doing versus what they said on election day, or what they said up until election day. And so how do you really become invested and pay attention? And it's not just a one-day commitment. I voted, I got my sticker, and I feel good about myself. But also making an informed decision. How do you determine who has the best agenda for America, even if I don't individually benefit? So for me, it's just always just remember every year I kind of go back and look at the 50s, 60s, even before that, of video footage and documentation on how much of a fight it was, and just the digital documentation that has surfaced now about, of people not being allowed to cast a vote, of being treated less than human, not really, the 3/5, and we know the history of that. But it's like, I don't, especially as I got older, I didn't feel like I had an opportunity. I don't have a choice, right? Because they didn't have a choice. So I got to vote on my behalf and their behalf. And also I have 2 sons. And so it's important for me to demonstrate what I saw as well, so they understand that what that right and their responsibility is when they get older as well.
I know. And so Paul, you worked it, but now you're actively studying the system. You're getting your master's. So what role does education have in this, as in understanding, particularly for Black men, but also just understanding for everyone, the understanding their rights, the system, why that's important, the inner workings of it. And, talk about your education, particularly right now, that's really driven you to, be active in the process.
Sure. I think the whole process, whether it was intentionally or unintentionally done, excuse me, is people oriented, right? And so, a lot of people have spent a lot of time trying to keep us out of the process. But ultimately, we can use those same levels of power to make changes in our community. And so it became very clear to me, especially kind of learning how systems are made and how programs are developed, that if we're not at the table when these decisions are made, they're literally taking resources out of the mouths of our families and putting them other places. And so it's really important that you voice your perspective, and a way of doing that is voting. And so it's just really important to be engaged in the process. Voting is not just one day. It's a lot of different choices that go on, even up to the point where we get to election day, after election day. But even if you look at the ballot in Fairfax County right now, not only are you picking elected officials, but there are 2 bond issues, and bonds are a way that local governments use to fund large-scale projects, capital projects. So they're talking about funding the Metro Rail and the Metro buses. Our people use those to get to jobs. If those bonds aren't successful, then we could possibly lose those services. So how much impact that would have on our communities, not having those type of services. So they're all connected. They're all part of this process. And so voting is one key that we have access to, and everybody's supposed to have access to, and people have died for you to have access to. So why don't we use it? So that's why I think it's important.
No. Yeah, Dad, go ahead and say something.
About something that Mr. Davis said, and several people have already said, voting is not just one day. It's like any other thing of value. You got to put the work in. One of the things, a gem, if I could share with, you have to be an informed voter, which means you probably have to do some research. What I have seen mostly as a voting official is people wait to the last moment and try to do a quickie research. The value comes in understanding the second and third order of effect of whatever decision you make. So what I'm saying is like sports, it's like art, it's like anything else. You got to put the work in to get the product. I mean, how many times we heard the athlete, the reason I'm, this and that is because I put the work in. What is the same thing with voting? You got to put the work in. And the work is doing your research, finding out about bond issues, finding out about congressional amendments and what impact that has. Most things you can even find out, because politicians love to tell you what they're going to do. You can find out their record of how they vote on certain type of issues. But you got to put the work in. The information's there. You got to dig for it. So
I don't know, Dad. I want to dive into that, and I'm gonna ask Tyleek my next question, but I want to dive into you and ask you another question. It's like, you got to put the work in, and the information's there. But I think that we're over inundated with information. So one, I would like to say, Dad, how do you find your information? And then Tyleek, I have a question for you in regards to information. But like, we got the internet, we got the information highway, whatever. How would you tell someone, across the board, young, old, to find that information, Dad?
Well, if you are in Fairfax County, there are several websites that'll take you to the voting process, and also, let's say you want to register to vote. Well, there's a specific website you can go to that. You want to request absentee ballot. That information is basically and you showed me how to do this. I have a list of different websites that you can find information from. And if nothing else, just go to your computer and type in a question and see what you get as far as the website is concerned.
Now, I'm going to say that too. Like you said, go to the website and type in a question. But I think Tyleek spoke to it earlier. We're going to get back to it. Now, on the inverse, there's so much information, a lot, everything's at our touch. How do I trust the information I'm learning? Also, digitally, getting flooded. And so, Tyleek, talk a little bit about the importance of citing, going to credible sources, that combating misinformation.
Absolutely. And I think especially for, my peer group and younger, there is a lot of information that is easily accessible, right? From, Google, the internet, the TikToks, the on Instagram, like there's a wealth of information, but not all information is accurate or truthful, right? We are in a new era or a different era, right, where a lot of information that is put out is not always factual, right? So one of the things that we always make sure that we do first as an organization within the NAACP, but specifically here in the Virginia State Conference NAACP, right, is that any information that we put out regarding elections, regarding individuals, regarding, different aspects of the election cycle or any candidate, right, we make sure that we do our due diligence and we fact check everything before we even put it out there on our social medias or on our website, right? Because we know that the NAACP historically has we have a reputation of being informed and giving people and being a reliable source for many people. I believe just recently a poll stated that, the NAACP is one of the top ranking, reliable resources, specifically when it comes to elections and candidates for African Americans and Black people in America. So that's first and foremost, right? But then also making sure that for, on the individual basis, right, that when we are, taking in information, because regardless of whether you're on the phone like my generation oftentimes can be, or, you're just living your daily lives, right? You see the ads on TV during the commercial breaks, right? Making sure that you always take that second to pause and make sure that, okay, and what I'm hearing, can I go and back this information up, right? So if a candidate is saying that they're doing all of these things, or that these, crazy stuff is happening in certain states throughout the, United States, right? Can I go and factually support that information that, this candidate is saying, right? And to Demarcus's point, right? Like the golden rule, you have to make sure you read it before you tweet it, right? Make sure you can cite your sources before, you are also, putting information out there. So I think that's one of the crucial things that we always try to do. And, where there is misinformation, making sure that we also combat that, right? We saw that in the presidential and the vice presidential debates, right? We had our moderators there to provide clarification if and when there was information that was said that was misleading or not accurate, right? So I think, we as, an organization, we have that responsibility, and we take pride in the fact that many Americans rely a lot on the information that we present, because we are nonpartisan, right? So, what we are presenting are the factual policy-based information, not steered by any specific political campaign or political affiliation. So I think, always citing your, going to those sources, and also always following the policies as well, right? Making sure that we are looking at what the policies say, because policies normally don't lie, right? So we can see, and I think Mr. Wilkinson spoke to this, right? We can see candidates' histories, we can see trends, right? We can see what they did support and what they didn't support, right? So also doing your extended research on these candidates who are asking you for their vote is crucial, because again, something that my nene always taught me, right? Elected officials and politicians, their responsibility is to the people, right? So whether this is a president, a senator, your local police chief or city council, right? Making sure that, these people that are asking you for your vote, right, that they are susceptible to the will of the people to which they are going to serve. But those are kind of the tips and tricks that I always tell people when it comes to any information regarding any candidate, especially in election seasons.
Phil, can I jump in?
Yeah, go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, I just want to add, I think another important part that we never talk about is knowing what you believe in yourself, taking a self-assessment about what the community, what kind of world do you want to live in. And you don't need to let a political party or a campaign or elected officials shape the world you want to be in. If you know something is right or wrong within yourself, then you can kind of go towards those individuals that are fighting for those principles. And I think sometimes we feel that, there's so many different issues out there in the world that, you know, we can't be a master of it all, so we kind of go on autopilot. But we still have to remember, you know, there are certain things that we are trying to achieve as a community, and so it's really important to kind of know how you would deal with some of these issues, because there comes a point in time where you will have to talk to these people, and they're going to be asking, they're going to be like, what do you want? I mean, I think a perfect case in point is the Harris campaign just released his agenda for Black men. Now, you know, it's not for all Black men, you know, but that's kind of their take at it. But if you as a Black male can't, or to anybody, can't talk about what is your demand, what do you want, what do you see, what do you know to need, what do you need to do to make your community better, and you can't explain that to somebody, then that's kind of where we get into these situations where people are guessing and doing things that they think they are and are pandering. So it's really important to know about your personal self, your self-assessment, and talk among yourselves, talk among your friends. And everybody's not going to be on the same level or the same thinking, but at least you kind of have a perspective. So when you read those news sources, you can say, well, you know, my more conservative friend thinks this way, my more liberal friend thinks this way. Like, where do I fall in the mix? So it's really important, just, I think, the self-assessment part. Just want to add that.
And I'm so glad you added that. You know, we have a guest join us, Renard. You know, I don't know. Please, I'll give him a credit. Also, he is actually a person that was at the table. You know, he was a representative in Warrenton. So, I think that's one of our questions about how important representation is. So, Renard, please, you know, introduce yourself, but also talk about the importance of being a participant in the process and why representation matters, why we need Black men or just diversity at the table in regards to our local politicians.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the opportunity, Phil, to, you know, come and share my views. So, yeah, I'm Renard Carlos, though. I spent 4 years on the Warrenton Town Council as an at-large council member. I was the youngest council member to ever be elected in Warrenton. I was the 5th African-American to be elected. I was the youngest African-American ever elected for the Warrenton Town Council. So I did 4 years on the town council there. And then after that term, I actually ran for mayor. And I almost won that, but we lost just by 11 votes. So we'll definitely probably trying to get in there again. But no, I think, you know, one of the things that for me that I always think is important is, you know, having, yes, a seat at the table, right? And when we think about, you know, when I was coming on the council and whatnot, you know, there's a lot of conversation about diversity. And, you know, we want to make sure that, and certainly that what I tried to explain, at least my perspective on it, was not just having diversity for diversity's sake, right? You don't want to just, oh, okay, I'm an African-American, so okay, now we kind of check that box. Or, you know, just trying to get people onto check boxes. But in my personal opinion, I think it's a real, having folks with different backgrounds and different perspectives really helps to enrich the conversation, right? It's not necessarily say like everything that I think is an African-American and what my life experiences are is going to be 100% right with my colleagues or everyone at the time. But it adds to that conversation to say, okay, well, you know, here's this policy. It looks like XYZ to someone, but hey, where I'm coming from, what my background is, hey, maybe we miss these things. Prime example, I remember for the town of Warrenton, right? We were trying to get, you know, better footing on technology. How can we use social media? How can we use our website? And I remember one of the things that stood out to me when I was on council, and, you know, I pushed with some other council members to try and make sure that, you know, we were updating our websites, we're, you know, being more, you know, front facing. Is when I looked at, you know, our website, I didn't see a whole lot of people that looked like me on there. And while it's still a work in progress, right? It was a work in progress, and we were kind of seeing a little bit of the behind the scenes, you know, because it wasn't live yet. Part of my experience before I was coming from, having to sit at the table saying, hey, you know, this may not seem like a really big deal to everyone, but hey, seeing folks who look like you represented on, you know, what's supposed to be for an entire town website, hey, that matters, right? When people are thinking about where do I want to live, what does the community look like, hey, it matters. So I think for that perspective, you know, certainly trying to, again, I would say not underestimating the value as well as African-American men, or not even just African-American men, the African-American women, or whoever you are, of how much your voice matters at the table. I think that for my experience, you know, sometimes, yes, while I was the youngest one there to, you know, share my ideas and my thoughts, you know, a lot of times I was met with kind of open arms, or at least open ears to listen, right? And when I would share my views, it wasn't something that was always met with, oh my gosh, that's a terrible idea, or no, we don't like it. It was, hey, thanks for bringing that to our attention. Oh, hey, you know, we didn't see it that way, right? The other thing, if I could mention real quick, Phil, I think, just on the role I think that we as citizens have in your communities, whether it's local government or you're running for state, national, don't underestimate your ability and the power that you have to really hold these candidates accountable and to say, don't just tell me what you think I want to hear. Hey, ask specific questions. The other thing is there is a huge power in being able to say, hey, I'll listen to you can you swing by my house for 5 or 10 minutes? And you know what? I'm going to invite maybe a dozen of my friends to come and to listen as well. Would you be interested? From someone who's ran for office, I would go, to extreme lengths, to get an opportunity to get in front of people anytime. And so I think sometimes we think, just as voters, like, oh, I'm kind of a small, little cog in the wheel or whatnot, they're not going to go out of their way to see me. Yes, they will. And especially if you're saying, hey, I'd love for you to, to come out and talk. And hey, by the way, I've got a dozen of my friends that I like to invite. Would you be interested? Oftentimes the answer is going to be yes. And so I just say, don't underestimate your power to get these candidates to come and really, share with you, and not just you, but with your friends, families, neighbors. When I remember running for council, even when it was time just to get signatures on ballots, right? And they told me to meet them in the parking lot, obviously be safe. But if it was, hey, I can meet you at Walmart at 1 o'clock and I'm happy to sign your ballot, I'd say, hey, I can absolutely be there. Wherever they were, I, as a candidate, would find a way to make time to be there. So just something to think about for folks that, don't underestimate your power to really engage with folks who are running for office.
Well, one, I got to check with my boss, AKA my wife, if I'm inviting politicians to my house and inviting the neighbors, you know what I'm saying? Because she's going to be like, make sure the house is clean. So that's number one. And number two, 11, where's those 11 people at? We need to get them next year. You know what I'm saying? But I think that shows actually the power of one vote, right? That's 11 votes. That could be one household. And I love that you shared that story because 11 can make a difference. I don't know. Whoever wants to answer this question, what do you say to the person that says to this point, they don't listen to me, they as in the government, it's a waste of my time. I'm not going to do it. I'm done. And we see a lot of that disengagement. Young, old, like young would be the young people. They don't listen to me. I'm too young. They don't listen. They don't care about my issues. Older people that say, I lived my life. Multiple politicians, they all just do lip service. I'm done. I'm not engaged. What do we say to those people? And, raise your hand or whatever, just speak out, whatever. And I want everyone to, whoever wants to answer that question. But that's the one I want to throw out to the group about, I'm done. I'm not doing this. They don't care about what I say anyway. It's a waste of time.
I'll jump in first, just briefly. I think the first important thing is to listen, right? I think too many times when we've gotten to these dialogues or debates, rather, they're not healthy, and we're just pushing each other's perspective on each other. But I think the important part is to listen and try to figure out why. Understand, was there harm? We do understand, as from my perspective as a Black man, there is a raw relationship of trust that has been tested, that has been tried, that has caused trauma and hurt on me. So I have to kind of restore my hope in different ways, in how the legal system will advocate on my behalf, will activate on my behalf, on men on this call, my sons, and what that looks like, and for our Black women, for other ethnicities, and what does that look like. But I think we just have to have a conversation and allow that person to breathe those experiences out, because anytime I've engaged in that type of conversation, being immediately dismissive does not win them over at all. And I think continue to consistently invite them to go to the polls, like the brother politician Renard shared, of, hey, let's meet in the parking lot, or let's grab a burger and talking about the different angles of politics, again, around the year, because we also can't dismiss the fact this time right now, it is highly political tension. And so everybody's pushing people to the left or to the right, or just standing strong in the middle, regardless of what candidate they may support. And so we're not having as healthy conversation. We're not having much space to have a healthy conversation. So I think it is important to listen, but also listen around the year and have these healthy conversations, these healthy dialogues around the year. So when this time, this specialized window pops up for national and local elections, then there's a more informed decision being made, and there's more investment on what that looks like. But I also have to actualize that if someone has had a rougher experience or has been has been attacked by a system or laws or whatever the case may be, has been a barrier for them, then that is going to skew their view on what this actually looks like. And so I think we just could continue to have those healthy dialogues and have those spaces and also share our education and just lean in and listen to each other.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any comments on that? About the disengagement and just they don't listen to me dialogue that they hear.
Yeah, so I'd add one thing I think as well as, as last week we were just saying, I totally agree. Yes, absolutely hearing, those feelings, saying, yes, I hear how you're feeling, and they're absolutely entitled to it. But then where do we go from there, right? So it's like, they're not going to listen to you. They're not going to listen to me. Okay, that's how you feel, or that's maybe what's happened to you in the past. Sometimes what I found, I don't know necessarily if you're going to call it gatekeepers, but, there's certain ways, right, that you might be a little bit more effective at actually reaching politicians or getting your policy in front of the right decision makers by the way that you go about it, right? So I think for us who are engaged with local elections or politics, it's meeting those brothers and sisters who are saying, they aren't listening to me, and saying, okay, yep, let's dive in a little bit deeper in it. I remember when I was on council, if someone would call me and they'd want to have a conversation, a lot of times, I would hear the concern, right, or the complaint, and then I would try and flip it back to say, okay, I think that I hear what you're saying. Let's look for policy that will actually address those issues, right? Because you brought up a good concern. Let's find out where in the policy we might be able to tweak this, or maybe even just create some new policy that addresses your concern. So a lot of times I think that when folks feel like politicians aren't listening and they aren't, reacting to them, I think sometimes it may be because those concerns maybe aren't coming out as, hey, here's a policy initiative that I want you to work on, candidate A. I'm not just complaining to you. I want the policy issues. So I think for us, if we can help folks, again, formulate those concerns into policy, that'd be a good place for us to work as well, for those folks who feel like they're disenfranchised and aren't heard.
I see a question, I think that's directly related. Demarcus, throwing up the alley, right? You work in housing and stuff. And so there's a question from Paula. She says, as a professional in university residential housing, what are the effective ways to engage our residents and get
I think the Ice Cold brother has actually frozen. So I think I'm gonna take this. I think he was trying to alley it to me. But thanks for that question, Paula. One thing I will say is I think it's important to
there you go. I told the kids get off the internet. Demarcus, that was yours. Can you answer that question real quick?
I got you. Yeah. So I think one thing that we can do is I don't think we have like any of us, much less like our kind of 20 and younger or 25 and younger student population. They don't see a lot of examples of what healthy dialogue looks like, and it's definitely not during the presidential race season, because this is probably a little bit more civil lately, but it's how do we also demonstrate what healthy dialogue looks like? And so because we want to be very mindful not to push opinions and perspectives, because especially 18 and 20-year-olds, they have a very informed opinion, and depending on what they experience in early education, but they also could not, and so they could be just repeating what you tell them to do or making decisions based on what you share. But I think creating a healthy dialogue space, and I think Mason, since I've been here since January of this year, has done a great job of putting initiatives out from various departments of just creating space to have healthy dialogue, not pushing opinions, not saying you should vote this way or another. Also putting information out there to allow people to make informed decisions for themselves, to allow them to sit and question, what does this candidate have my best interest in, or what does this policy mean? What is this linked to, or what is the history of what this candidate's profile may look like? And so I think we create those spaces to allow for exploration. And sometimes, because I don't think our students in my career of being in higher ed for nearly 20 years now, that students are often, they're dictated so much information, they're force-fed so much information, whether it's in the classroom or whether other things in other spaces. How do we say, all right, here's a healthy space. We're going to teach not what you should think or how you should vote, but we're going to teach that there is a space for you to have your thought and opinion, but not have respectful dialogue, even if there's disagreement. And so how do we model that so that behavior and that principle can be then put into practice by our students? And then also listen to our students, because I know I didn't feel like I had a voice as an 18-year-old outside of my family, but then I ran into professors and I ran into different campus administrators say, hey, actually, that is a good point. And I'm like, I'm 18, 19, and I'm like, okay, well, my opinion actually does matter. So it made me more inquisitive to think about what's going on. But in order for us to do that, we also have to stay informed of what's going on around us. It's very easy not to pay attention and want to keep your head down. And it can be a lot of over information, as we've shared earlier in this session. But it's important that we pay attention and share those things. And also not assume that people, just because they're 18 and they're studying engineering or they're studying to be a next doctor, that they assume that they know what's going on. So trying to understand where people are, and then providing a level playing ground for us to exchange information and perspectives, and again, sit and lean in and listen. And like Renard said, maybe meeting them in the space where they are in order to share that information and just listen to what they may say, what they may be thinking or feeling towards the voting process as well.
Excellent. Well, we got about 9 more minutes, so I got questions, and I want everyone to do their final comments or whatever. But the next question I want to ask to my dad, and then the next question after that is Tyleek. So, Dad, I think Renard brought up a good point about all year round and engagement and getting involved. You are a election official. What caused you? You're retired. You can live the dream. What caused you to get involved in the process, as a volunteer? And then what advice do you have about, or not advice, why is it important of civic engagement throughout the year? Having these conversations throughout the year is important.
You started to scare me, son, because ideas have been going around in my head, and that's one of the things I wanted to share with everyone. You asked the question about I'm not going to vote anymore because I can't get anything done, or it doesn't matter. Well, the last time I checked, non-action never moved anything. So, just from the common sense point of view, and I mean, you don't have to be ugly about it, but doing nothing doesn't solve anything. So engagement is important. The second.
So this is where my dad cut off for a little bit. He was sharing a lot, but we had some difficulties. So I just wanted to let the listeners know about those technical difficulties as we return back to the episode. Enjoy.
Looks like we might have froze up here a little bit. Is anyone able to still hear?
Yeah, I'm still here right now.
Okay.
Yep. But I don't see anybody else.
I'm still here.
See, the technology.
We're good.
Right, it made for us. Technology. This is why we gotta stay connected, stay informed. We must be doing a good thing.
There you go. Y'all, I ain't gonna lie. Y'all just missed my dad dropping mad gems, and he was still going with the computer off. Like, I don't know. Technology, I told my kids get off their devices. And so where my dad at? Is he still there? My dad's not there. I'm going to ask this last question because this is crazy, and then we'll just go ahead and wrap it up because I think I got too much Wi-Fi. My last question is for Brother Tyleek, and then I'll try to get my dad in here. We got Miss Lightfoot. She said, it's been discussed in other spaces that Messenger Matter, as a Black woman, I find it difficult to get Black men to engage and become a voter or not just a volunteer or not just a voter. Any advice? And then I'll try to see if I can get my dad back on here for final words.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that speaks to a huger disconnect, specifically when we're talking about within the Black community. Being very frank and upfront, right? The sisters historically have been on it, right? Whether we're talking our D9 sororities, whether we're talking just mobilizations, right? Black women have consistently showed up and showed out when it comes to both engagement and voter engagement initiatives, voter registrations, etc., as well as turning out and turning elections and turning out the vote. I think when we then turn that to Black men, I think that one of the things that we try to utilize within the NAACP, right, is really getting to the root of why folks aren't engaged and using that as an opportunity to bring them into the fold. Oftentimes what I have seen is that a lot of, again, whether it's the fatigue, the disenfranchisement, or just specific situations when it comes to specific policies, right? A lot of Black men, and specifically speaking from my demographic, a lot of young Black men are very, very specific policy kind of base when it comes to engagement, right? And think that, oh, well, if they're not focusing on this, then what's the point of me voting, right? Or what's the point of me getting engaged because this is my focus? And I think that one of the things that we always try to, that I try to utilize in all the conversation that I have is kind of bringing that full circle, right? When it comes to as Black people in general, right? How many people that came before us had to fight so vehemently, right? Black men, Black women, to even give us the opportunity to go to the polls, right? So I think that, Ms. Lightfoot, one of the biggest advice, and again, Messenger could matter for certain demographics, especially if we're talking about, 18, 19-year-old young men, right? But I do think that, one of the best advice that I could give you and any Black women who are interested in engaging and mobilizing young Black men specifically, right, is, opening up and doing what Mr. Demarcus had mentioned, right, when it comes to, like, opening up that open communication and dialogue, right, as to why they don't opt in, right? What is it about our election process that, they feel any hesitancy about, right? And then per those conversations, that would then allow them the opportunity to engage in further analysis, further discussions that will hopefully then expose them and open them up to wanting to learn and continue to engage. That's all I got. You just got to continue to have the conversations.
I don't know, man. I think we got too much. I think the oppressors is trying to hold us down. So I'm going to respect everyone. I think that if I could, I will say some parting words, have everyone on stage. Wrap this up. I don't know, man. The kids question my Wi-Fi. I want to say this. This has been a great dialogue. And obviously the conversation doesn't start. For those that weren't able to make it live, I'm going to edit all those weird, awkward gaps out, and I will upload the audio to Spotify. I want to say a thank you to all our panelists tonight. For a great conversation, minus the technical errors, but this was I think most of it, I'll say, let's give it a 95% good with 5% trash Wi-Fi. Blame my house and no Wi-Fi extender. And I wanted to give an opportunity to give everyone a last minute shout out, but I think I'm scared of my Wi-Fi. So I'm going to do that while I have some good Wi-Fi. So Paul, thank you for your service and what you're doing in the county. Good luck to you and your studies. Renard, thank you so much for what you're doing. Next election, it froze again. All right, well, I'm gonna keep going. Thank you, everybody. My dad, thank you. I love you. Keep doing what you need to do. Demarcus, thank you for all that you're doing at Mason. And Tyleek, thank you for what you're doing with the NAACP. Positive Filter listeners, everyone, please, I apologize for the technical errors, but we are wrapping up. It's 9 o'clock anyway. So I know y'all need to get to bed. This is past my bedtime. Additionally, as I said earlier, this show will be still available live on iTunes. The video will still be live on YouTube, the podcast Facebook page, as well as the LinkedIn, right? My LinkedIn. But then the audio, I will be sharing the audio on Positive Filter. So those that are audio listeners, I will make sure to put every gentleman's contact information that they feel comfortable with in the show notes. And I'll edit the description of these videos so that you can engage with them on LinkedIn and all the various platforms to continue this conversation. I think what I've learned overall as a theme is that your vote matters, right? Whether indifferent, white, left, whatever. But you have to do action. I love what my dad says. No problems are solved by doing nothing. Do something. Participate. Voice your opinion. Stand up. If you're upset about something, don't just sit back there. Say you're upset and share that as civilly. You can do it. You can share disagreement with civility, but you can say respectfully, I disagree, and come with facts and stuff. So I really appreciate this dialogue we had tonight. I love, someone said very, very earlier, I love this example of Black excellence, that we're doing something. We have a voice. When we mobilize, we can make a lot of change. So thank you so much for joining. Thank you for tuning in, and we're out. All right, you can end the stream.
Thank you for listening to Positive Filter, a podcast that focuses on family, friends, career, with a little self-help along the way. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your family and friends, and like the Facebook page, Spreading Positivity of Movement. Thanks for listening.
So this is where we had our first interruption in the episode. And so hopefully those problems will be solved. Hopefully.